Yo, what's up? State of Everything. Live again. Chilling, dude. It's another day in America, in the world. Cracking open brews. Doing the things with the news. Listening to the Q statistics. Yeah, I watch the Trues. Sometimes listen to Russell Brand. He's the man. Rhyming like I'm Dan Beckerman. Shadow president of the LA Galaxy. You feel me, bro? Yeah. All right, enough of that nonsense. Shit about the jive turkeys out there on the internet these days. What's up, man?
Dude, have you ever thought about like a rapping career at all? Like
Well, yeah, I guess I just kicked
music,
off.
making music?
Yeah, I got some rhymes. I got some beats. I'm just trying to, just produce more, man. I'm just trying to get my vibe out there more. You know what I mean?
I feel you, man. I mean, it's good. It's putting your vibe out there is what it's all about.
Especially to that German techno. Like I got some sick flow to that. All right. Um, we got an organic chocolate stout on the State of Everything. This is the sponsored beer for today. Not really sponsored, but who's counting? Who's keeping track? It's Samuel Smith's organic chocolate stout. It's a malt beverage with natural flavor added. Wonderful. Where is this located? Who knows? I can't tell. UK. I think it's a UK thing. So anyways, yeah, how's out there in the frozen tundra, Matthias?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, same old. Don't need this because it's freezing in this basement here. I'm below ground. I got a blanket. I've got my yak wool sweater on, same as last week, but because it's been cold last week, it's definitely colder today. And it's the same old beer, Lagunitas, because I've really tried my best to not leave the house at least the past 48 hours. Because it's like been, negative 40 wind chill, pretty about was the temperature. So the polar vortex, man, it's a real thing and it's cold.
So I'll quote one of our finest presidents. He said something like, "Could use a little bit of that good old warming now, right?" I think he said that in a
I
tweet.
wish I wish we could have some of that global warming um, now in this area.
Yeah, you sound just
The furnace has been working in this house full blast. We've kept the shades down. We have like been super fast about like opening and closing doors. Um, it's crazy, we could really use some of that southern global warming, and I think it might actually be warmer a couple days. So
well, I saw there was the news out there. Supposedly, there's been some deaths out there in the Midwest. About 8 people, fatalities. You walk outside and you basically have a chance of getting frostbite within minutes.
yeah, it's
Supposedly,
like five minutes or something, right?
I wouldn't know. I'm out in the southwest part of the country, where this is the best time of year to be here before it gets too hot in the summer.
Is it actually?
Well, no, I don't know. I'm just like I was in Arizona, and over there, it's palpable. Like people are like, yo, like this is the best time of year here. LA, I think, is a little bit better in the summer. I mean, Arizona gets a little bit unbearable in like the July August heat, but yeah, it's crazy. I don't know what's happening with the old with this guy. This, I think, probably gender neutral, but this planet is really giving us a whole lot of material to work with, right, Matthias?
Yes, but I think that we took a survey of our listeners, right? We were just talking about that earlier. We compiled all the data from the statistics of just all of the listens, and I think that the general reception that we got was that the last 2 episodes were pretty heavy. And I mean, it was good. It was politically, there's crazy political crap happening, but didn't you remember talking about that, Alex? How just the episode might have been a little intense and downer, so we're going to try to mix it up. Some such.
We triggered a lot of liberals. Um, a lot of liberal tears after those episodes.
Did
Definitely,
we?
we didn't really give any trigger warnings either, so I apologize. I know we definitely affected some folks out there. I hope minds didn't explode or heads didn't explode, because that's not what we're here for. I mean, we want people to explode in positive ways, not in self-destructive ways. So we hope you're still mellow. We hope you're having a good time out there. We hope you're not harming yourselves and you're still happy about things, because, things aren't that dark. Things are pretty okay for the most part. I mean, even if people are dying in the Midwest, it's the Midwest. I mean, what do you expect?
We're hardy folk, man. I mean, I don't prefer it. I yeah, not a fan of it. But yeah, but I take your. I think people out Chicago. There was something trending in the on the social medias about people like were offering to buy. Or giving gift cards or just donating money to I think homeless people to just like for meals or something, just to like have some place to go to get out inside somewhere. So to your point, man, nothing is there's tends to be some other story to keep your spirits afloat in these polar vortex crazy times.
Swirling into the polar vortex. That's what we're doing, into the black hole of consciousness in the late 2010s.
So, are you familiar? You kind of froze, but I wanted to ask this question. Are you familiar with how a polar vortex forms?
No, let's hear.
Well, I'm glad that you asked. Um, so I guess there's New York Times had a really cool kind of interactive article or whatever. They showed the top of the Earth spinning around, and there's like three different rings of air, I guess. And obviously, the coldest is at the top center, and then the outer layer just outside of that is like more or slightly warmer, and that's normally this like it just kind of flows around more or less, and that's normally what our winters are. But whenever, I guess, I don't know if it's because there's like the ice caps or the ice is melting and stuff, so um, it could be related to global warming, but basically the center ring that's spinning can sometimes break up. And the last time that happened was in 2014, the last time that the Midwest, Chicago, and other places, whatever, North America, got got a piece of the polar vortex. It spins off into three, kind of its own little like cyclone thing, just on a huge level. And I guess so that's like what happens is that for like a few days it's been going around, and now it's like leaving right now. But so it's pretty kind of cool, man. I don't know.
What does it mean?
I think it could. There's probably some connection to global warming with that, but it also just does happen regularly. They're just becoming more frequent. So, um, weather's going to get crazier for everyone in every way. Maybe I don't know, but it's just kind of it's just interesting. I think the science of it alone.
Do you think it has anything to do with the current density shifts that are going on planet Earth? There's a bit of a vibration shift going on, supposedly. If you talk to the spiritual communities, especially on YouTube, on blogs, there is this widespread belief that we are ascending into 5D consciousness. You know about this?
I did not, and I saw your Instagram story, and I had no idea what the hell you were talking about, but you said it in a funny way, and you edited it nicely, cut it back to the desert, wherever you were at. So please tell us.
Okay, so I'll pull up this article here from fractalenlightenment.com. We'll post a link. It's
How can I interrupt? How did you first come across this?
so I've kind of dipped in and out of various spiritual communities over time, and that is included on YouTube. And I came across this spiritual awakening counselor named Victor Odo. So if you guys are interested in kind of talking about kind of some spiritual stuff, he's a go-to guy. He does energy updates. Victor Odo, and I think he kind of started talking about this idea of transcending into a another dimension of consciousness. And I think the idea is not really as it's not like a physical location that you travel to. It's more of an inner dimension. And that's kind of what this fractalenlightenment.com is a great resource too for people that are questioning the self and self-actualization, manifest law of attraction kind of things. So this article, it's by Nikki Sapp. It says begins out saying when talking about esoteric topics such as third dimensional reality, ascending into fifth dimensional consciousness, or raising your vibration, it can begin to sound like we are explaining the plot to a science fiction movie. Even for this seasoned spiritual seeker, trying to describe the intangible in words that make sense and are understandable to another person with no prior whatever. Basically, the idea is it's a lot of words that it's for a principle that is kind of it's a speechless kind of thing. So we'll break it down. The 3D realm basically is the physical realm that we're currently in. So it's like matter, space and time and all that. Well, let's look up what 3D actually is, right? It's isn't it like depth? Yeah, go on.
I'm just gonna pause. I think you and I are currently experiencing a fractal distortion of some sort through the internet. So I don't know if
Whatever.
is it because of is there anything we can do to smooth things out? But you can keep going, but you kind of went in and out, back and forth there.
Well, that's the way it is, man. So yeah, 3D is width, height, depth, and length, right? So that's the physical realm that we're in. So you see yourself as a separate entity in comparison to other people and the universe. So you realize that you're a person that thinks thoughts, and there are certain things that are defined, right? In the world. The fourth dimension reality is when your consciousness begins to awaken, supposedly. It's the passageway to the 5D. So things start to break down. You see things in more of like a spiritual way. Maybe you start to see more synchronicities, patterns. You start to understand things in like a bigger picture, you kind of form this feeling of ikigai, which is this Japanese, term for wholeness of being, like a reason for being. So you might start to have your ego break down or whatever. And then the fifth dimensional reality is unity consciousness. The all is the one and the one is the all. So this is when your ego drops and judgments begin to fade away. Basically, they call this the love dimension because you experience a radical kind of feeling of oneness with everything. Like you might feel oneness with that beer or a tree or something. And it might be completely irrational, but it is this kind of consciousness shift that people in this, on these online spiritual communities kind of talk about as this a connection with the source or with the universe or with God or whatever. And I guess I wanted to bring it up because I was kind of thinking about this the other day, is the only way to kind of get past all the petty bullshit that happens politically day to day is to kind of come at it with a more universalist mindset where it's look, we're all this is inevitable. Like having political differences isn't like a negative thing. I think right now we're kind of seeing these kinds of things as like, oh my God, we're so divided and we hate each other. But like maybe this is the first step towards seeing that, like, you know, kind of showing that we're all in this human experience together, and that might help us understand the perspective from the other more by seeing this kind of shared common humanity that we all experience. Maybe that needs to be, maybe there is some kind of dimensional shift going on through the fact that we're so immersed in our technology, and it's like so like in our face now. It's like, dude, like if we all just need to chill out and like not like freak out about like everything.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I think that's intense, man. That's a cool theory. I think that there was some supernatural dimensional forces that were going through your explanation of it, which is telling, I think, to me. But yeah, man, I mean, that's like philosophical and stuff, you know, like if that's, um, if like, I mean, you're the love dimension, I would equate, I think in, if Christian terms or whatever, would be like heaven, right? I mean, if that, is that like, no, is that what like, would that be equivalent to like what, I mean, does it, can that like fall through into, to make it, I mean, is there much of a difference there between that and some of the end goals, if you will, of most of the religions that people are familiar with?
Well, that's the thing, right? So that's this idea of having an end goal. It's a very Christian thing to say that heaven comes after this life, you know? But I think a more like, it might be a more Buddhist principle where you achieve nirvana in this lifetime or enlightenment, you know? Like, why do we have to wait till death when we cease to exist to find enlightenment through heaven? Like, what if, so in a way, you're right. It is kind of a religious idea, but it's also not religious at all, because it's saying that the spiritual experience is this right now. Like this is the best it's ever going to be, because after you die, there's uncertainty, and you might, who knows what that, you know, your being might transform into something else entirely. So why would we wait towards that moment to achieve this kind of perspective that we can have right now, basically, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, however, I think that's a cool way of just theorizing about what's going on. So I mean, I certainly don't have a problem with it. I think it's interesting that if that is a way to get people to think outside of themselves and just kind of, you know, I don't know, man, any way to reintroduce some humanity into the situation and just like get people to work together again. I think if there was just a little bit more, um, I don't know, camaraderie and more community somehow. Um, there's just a lot of dysfunction that gets old, I guess, right? Um, so whether that's through that or people just chilling out and like um, any number of ways, but yeah, that's definitely the ideal, I think.
How do we become more transcendentalists? Like you look at guys like John Muir, Walt Whitman, Emerson, like these are guys, Thoreau, these are American heroes, man. The transcendentalists were guys in the 1800s, I believe. You know, they're kind of responding to the Industrial Revolution, as far as I know, and the rapid changes unfolding in American society. And you think about the time they were doing this, talking about all this stuff about, you know, being connected to the land, and through that you're connected to God or the whole. They're pretty, you know, weirdly like, they're kind of the first, I mean, they're the first American conservationists. They're like almost like a Buddhist kind of level of, you know, this transcendental consciousness shift, you know? And I think we have to kind of return to, I mean, they're Enlightenment thinkers, you know? These guys were just, incredible like poets and these connectors between society and the natural world. Do you know much about the transcendental?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like you've told me a couple of different times about Walt Whitman and maybe what he used to do, but yeah, man, like lay it on me.
Well, I mean, I don't, I've read, some of these guys here and there. Um, I don't know if my internet just is paused, but so here we have the Wikipedia. Transcendentalism is a philosophical movement that developed in the late 1820s and 1830s, so it's earlier than I thought, in the eastern United States. It arose as a reaction to protest against the general state of intellectualism and spirituality at the time. The doctrine of the Unitarian Church as taught at Harvard Divinity School was of particular interest. Um, it emerged from English and German Romanticism, biblical criticism of Herder and Schleiermacher, and the skepticism of David Hume, and the transcendental philosophy of Immanuel Kant and German idealism. It was also strongly influenced by Hindu texts on the philosophy of the mind and spirituality, especially the Upanishads. A core belief of transcendentalism is the inherent goodness of people and nature. Adherents believe that society and its institutions have corrupted the purity of the individual, and they have faith that people are at their best when truly self-reliant and independent. So the idea of self-reliance is massive. That was an 1841 essay by Emerson, Ralph Waldo Emerson, called Self-Reliance, and I've read that. And that's one of his biggest like themes, talking about like how it's important for an individual to avoid conformity and false consistency, and to kind of, it's this very American ideal of really being on your own. Like this is a precursor to me. The transcendentalists were like the Beat generation before the Beat generation, like in the 1800s, like where they were like, look, we achieve, enlightenment or whatever through like returning to the land in a way. I mean, they kind of didn't do the whole like hedonism aspect of the Beats. Those guys were pretty like crazy in a different way, but they took this part of that transcendental thought. And so it also says here that it emphasizes, transcendentalism emphasizes subjective intuition over objective empiricism. Adherents believe that individuals are capable of generating completely original insights with little attention and deference to past matters.
Interesting. That's cool, man. I like the Eastern influence you said, right? Like Hinduism.
Mm-hmm.
I did not realize that. That's interesting, because I almost feel like, in a lot of ways, I mean, I just talked about like how it'd be cool to have community, more of a community aspect. I feel like we're very individualistic now, so I don't know if there's like something that seems to be, maybe, I mean, you can be yourself and you want to be independent thinking and like be your own individual and creative person, do whatever you got to do, but also, I don't know, we need to, maybe like back then, man, 1830s, there were cities and stuff, but you had a lot more time on your own, and people were like, just didn't interact with as many people these days. I don't know. I mean, it's good to retreat back into yourself and do your own thing, but everyone is kind of with and interacts with other people more, and just in general, I feel like, in order to kind of move forward, some better just improvement of relationships with people, or just be able to like disagree with other people and not get so, I mean, I don't know, maybe that is pessimistic, but I just on the one point, that was my feeling.
Well, yeah, but see, I mean, what kind of individualism are you talking about, right? Like we're more individualistic in some ways now, but does anybody forage their own like food now? Like if you live in a city, are you ever gonna like, are you gonna grow your own food? Are you going to like, you're gonna go to a market that's prepackaged things that someone did for you? That's what I'm talking about, self-reliance. Like you might be individualistic, like, oh my God, I'm on my phone and I'm my own person and I'm gonna be like, secluded into my own little digital world all the time. not talking about that kind of individualism. I'm talking about actually like, how do you live a life as a human in a primitive way where you have to like, build your own house. You have to, this is like what Walden's all about. Like, basically like going out into the woods and like fending for yourself and being on your own, building your own shelter and dealing with the seasons and dealing with the animals and dealing with whatever you have to deal with, the elements, just life, without having like calling the landlord to like figure out your electricity or whatever. Like that's what I'm talking about, self-reliance that we have lost. And the people in the cities don't know how to do any of that stuff because they don't ever need to. It's all about just a quick phone call or an internet search away. That's kind of the idea of what these guys were talking about, and that you're not corrupted by the city when you have to do everything on your own. It's a hard lifestyle. It's not like a fun like walk in the park, but it's a growth opportunity to like live on your own and live and be a real human. That's individualism. Maybe
Yeah,
cities don't do that. We don't have that anymore in cities.
yeah. I think there are ways. I mean, I think that's why a lot of people definitely. I mean, that's why I said before. I mean, that's why we had went on our road trip. It's people do. I mean, cities you don't have that, but you adjust, and then you go on vacation for like a week or two or something. And I think that's why people like going on people, or just in the summer, you spend weekends. That's what weekends are for. You leave the city and go to, the beach or do whatever. Chicago has beaches, which is what makes it awesome. But yeah, man, there's like stuff that you can do in like rural and outside the city, so I definitely buy into that. That's why I want you to go to Quetico. Anybody should go to Quetico, or everyone shouldn't go to Quetico so that it stays not popular, or amongst those people who do it. But it doesn't matter because most people, Quetico is not the normal relaxing vacation. You're carrying a canoe for however many days, or you're paddling in a canoe, and then when you get to the end of the lake, you flip it on, you portage and carry it to the other side, and it's real deal camping. But it's, I think, my favorite, maybe one of my favorite, if not my favorite place on earth, just because it absolutely is the most liberating place ever. You feel like you are completely just in a totally remote place. It is weird to come across other people, and it's awesome. And it's amazing how normal that becomes after like a day of being out there. You just fall and slip into gear, and it's like, all right, yeah. And you like ride. I mean, you do whatever you want to do: fish, write, read, cook, and just relax, swim, clean up. So whatever, it's awesome. But my other thing was going to say, what I was also going to say for people who do, but what if like be independent? You said earlier, independence of and self-reliance. What if you applied that to, as far as individually being just creatively independent and self-reliant, so that you are, in terms of, you have independent self-expression on, I mean, people do that, but I also feel like there's lots of, I don't know, there's trends and everything. And I guess like things are trendy and become popular, and everyone does them for a reason. But, right. Like, does that sound like, maybe that's like how we break out of these narrow kind of modes of thought that are cause for the discrimination or conflict, disagreement in general. It's because there's these like just very, I don't know, these ways of thinking that if people were able to break out of them, it would just be cooler and better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cheers.
I lost my train of thought. Yeah, I mean, man.
Is that like a modern day transcendental? I mean, would he agree if he were here? I don't know. That's the question.
I think one of the main, I think, points that I am trying to make here is that um,
I don't mean to put you on the spot as if you're the the Whitman transcendental expert either. So you just made it a cool point, and maybe I'm running too far with it.
it's not even about transcendentalism. I'm trying to talk about how we move forward. So like, I think we need to learn more about what those guys thought about, and what their philosophy was, and what their writings stood for, and in their place as, you know, at the top of like American canon, basically, as it should be. What I'm trying to understand, I think, is um, I don't know if these routines that people get into in cities, like the modern lifestyle, like, is it healthy? I think we have to talk about health and look at, what is natural for us. Like what you just said was like, going fishing and like having to carry your own canoe and like, do all these things that are essentially primitive things, like writing, like that's like cave drawings, man. Like that's as primitive as it gets, dude. Like, and that's awesome. And what I'm saying is, the further we drift from that, like the further we're into this treadmill of like, you get into a car for an hour. Like the shift is like very noticeable when you enter cities. Like people are tenser. There's more anxiety. Like you talk to people not in cities and then people in cities, or you talk to people that have moved from cities and they just tell you that like they're not looking over their shoulders as much. Like they're not as anxious. Like there's not as many people around. There's less cars, there's less energy around. I think this is it is a vibrational issue when you have so many people that are like these little like pockets of like energy, and if they're like vibrating on this weird level, like if they're all like only immersed in their phone, or only immersed in their work, or only immersed in like putting food on the table, and they're like desperate to do it, and they're like, it's driving them nuts because this lifestyle just drains you. It does, if you never like see like the daylight. If you sit at a cubicle all day, like, and so you live this like office space kind of mentality, and like sure it pays the bills, but like I'm saying like a lot, I guess the California is rubbing off on me. But
Yeah.
yeah.
So I see where you're going, but I it's all. I mean, I think that our cities are not going to be the same way, and people will not always live the same way. So I mean, there's like there cities are becoming more eco-friendly, and they're putting trees up all over the place. And I mean, our cities were designed in a certain period of time. I just don't think that they're going to necessarily be like that. And who knows how, as the weather changes, as populations change, as technology changes, as people change, what cities are going to look like or be like, and whether or not they'll be more hospitable in those ways that you described. But at the same time, I think that cities offer a lot of different things that rural places don't have, that are just beneficial in different ways. And you have to find relaxation and time on your own, and clarity, or you do whatever you need to do. But I mean, ultimately, man, like I think that, I mean, cities are a product of civilizational advance, and if we're going to keep going on that path, which we are and we need to, it's the only way humans can go, is to go forward and to keep it moving along. The economy grows and whatever, and ultimately we should be and are already, but I want us to be more of a spacefaring civilization and country. And I think that's all kind of on that wavelength and whatever. So we need to keep going in that direction and whatever. But well, I'm not. If you have something to say, I don't want to. If you want to go, I was going to talk about I had a different idea, but do
What?
you have?
Terraform like Mars? I mean, like it sounds good, but like you can't replicate life on Earth. I mean, it sounds it's fun. Oh, we're gonna explore space, maybe meet aliens, and that'll be great for everyone. Obviously, like if that happens, that nothing bad will happen if we run into an alien species, right? Because we're so
We don't
friendly
need.
to ourselves here on planet Earth. You know, I've seen Avatar. Okay, I know how it goes.
So you don't, dude. We don't. Who cares if we could like use Mars as a base for, or use the moon, have a base on the moon to be able to to go to Mars, and
Why? Why do we want to go to Mars? I don't.
because we're gonna, it gives us a purpose, man. Okay, it allows the human species to live for longer. If anything happens to the Earth, once every 250,000 years or whatever, there's an extinction event. Okay. Don't you think it'd be kind of worthwhile if human beings figured out how to put themselves on a different rock and then could live and have an insurance policy and continue to explore the universe and have life exist here? Like, do I need to explain that to you?
Yeah, but that's an easy cop out to say, oh yeah, it's okay, just trash Earth because we have Mars. Like, no, like
It's not trashing.
I'm
It's
with
not
the fight
trashing.
for Earth. Like, let's try to protect Earth. And yes, you're right. We should have a contingency plan, of course, but we shouldn't just keep digging our own graves on this planet just so we can live on Mars, which sounds horrible. I've seen The Martian. I don't need to eat potatoes or shit or whatever he eats. And you know what? Like, I don't care about like this kind of idea of like, look, terraforming is a good idea. It's first of all, it's going to take decades, and like
Whoop-dee Schmidt.
it's gonna be more of like a space station that you'd live on, and you're gonna be having these like huge helmets, and you're gonna be in this bulky thing, and you're gonna look outside, and oh wow, it's space. But like what? Like I like looking at a river and a waterfall and like a mountain, man.
That's fine. You don't have to go, but I mean,
Fun out there.
I think it's exciting, man. Space is good. I love Earth. We should not destroy it, but it's not an either or. It's a, you can have both, and anybody who wants to stay on Earth, I think it'll bring us together. I think by going and and advancing in space and having people appreciate Earth, I think by leaving it, by being able to expand your consciousness metaphorically and maybe literally by learning about the science that's involved and just all like the pinnacle of human achievement, that human beings set foot on the moon. That is an unbelievable thing. We have hurled a little contraption into outer space, Voyager 1 and 2. That's the only thing that might ever exist after the Earth moves and rotates and gets burned up by the sun, and which is guaranteed to happen. So that there is at least something that to show for us, for this thing that it is. And I think that if we are able to continue that by having people learn and just be able to just be excited about space and the excitement of what it is and what it means, then that might be the solution to our problems. I mean, what pale blue dot? I mean, are you familiar with that? Carl Sagan
Yeah.
got Voyager to turn around, and you see a little pale blue dot in between a beam of light. I mean, it's like we're all just, it's nothing. It's a miracle. Every second is a miracle. So I think that is it. That's why you do it. And you say, whoever wants to go to Mars, go and have a ball. And anybody who wants to stay here can stay here. It's the same exact thing from when people wanted to leave Europe and sail across the edge of the abyss because they thought the world was flat or whatever. I mean, I understand it's worlds of difference technologically, but I mean, because it's technologically difficult, I mean, if people want to do it and it's achievable and there are positive benefits, there's benefits that are good politically, economically, socially, then why would we not? That's the only, as far as I'm concerned, we should be spending as much, I mean, in a perfect world, that we would be spending all of our budget, our trillions of dollars of money on cool things like that.
Well, see, this is where I think you're wrong. I mean, it's connected, and I think you have a lot of good points, but I think you're talking about we're going to expand our consciousness by leaving Earth. See, that's where I completely disagree. I think that the consciousness argument is going to be one where, you know, we're going to realize, many already have, that deeper consciousness doesn't exist outside of you. So the next big frontier, and people have said this, like the next frontier is the inner consciousness that we all have to go through in order to actually, not kill each other or like ruin the whole thing. And so, you know, I get that the pale blue dot thing, that's connected, because then you see the oneness of what our home really is and what we live on. But I think the real battle is facing our own inner demons, because all of human history has been, rife with conflict and violence. I think if we battle our own demons, this is what, going back to the 5D consciousness layers of like, wellness. If we all can get along here, we're not going to necessarily get along if everybody goes to the moon. I mean, this is going to create more competition, essentially. People, the haves and the have-nots, who can afford going to space. I'm talking about how we develop like actual like tolerance for our fellow human beings, and going to the moon or Mars will never change that. It might, but I mean, it's connected in some way, but it's not the whole answer.
I mean, so two things. One, we used to have an idea, we used to believe that our country was capable of insane shit.
It is.
Because we used to be able to do that, but now that's my point. If we committed ourselves like we committed ourselves to going to the moon by the end of the 60s, if we committed ourselves to doing something worthwhile, or just because it's amazing, and that doesn't need to be going to the moon. It could be giving everybody health care, or it could be, giving everybody, we tried the war on poverty. I mean, whatever. We could do a bunch of stuff, but like, the problem is we can't agree on anything because nobody wants to pay for anything. But my point is that we used to be able to think big and do amazing things. And that's why everyone's, proud to be an American, and we pat ourselves on the back. We really haven't done, I don't know, we've invented the internet, and thank God for that. Thank God for that. The internet's amazing, but whatever. Who knows? It's impossible what to envision what life would be like on Mars, and whether or not you'd be in a bubble suit, and you could do whatever. But in terms of what you said before, making life more livable here and now, I think that we are making progress. We could be on the cusp. We are. People talk about it like green revolution, but on an environmental scale. But I think we are a few years away from just transforming, just people having a different, it's just going to be cooler on one level. The fact that soon nationwide, cannabis is going to be legalized. And I just think that with capitalism and the economy such that it is, people are going to be motivated to make money in any way that they can. And I think it's going to be very interesting and cool to see how that impacts the society. Once we figure out and we make it safe, but people's changing perceptions about this and what's permissible about it, I think is just pretty cool, and it's going to be exciting, and I think it'll be good, hopefully, for the economy. And maybe what you said before about making people's lives better and whatnot. But that's my segment, and that's my transition into what I want to talk about with Murder Mountain on Netflix. What I wanted to talk to you about before, man. I mean, you've watched it, right? You've seen a few episodes.
Yeah.
It's I think it is one of the coolest stories out there. And anybody who appreciates the myth of the West and the American outlaw, about surviving on your own and trying to make it and strike big and become rich. It's like it's the equivalent of the 1876, or whatever, the gold rush. California, I mean, it's born out of the 60s and 70s protest movement. These people these people who just went up to Northern California to live in these communes and just figure out their own way of life and do whatever, and survive on their own. And growing cannabis was part of that. That was a staple as far as they were concerned. And so they have grown that and cultivated it and had strains and basically preserved or cultivated the cannabis, these plants and whatnot, and kept it alive throughout the entire decades-long prohibition. And so this show goes into how basically the legalization process is just affecting this community and this region. And there's a white market and a black market. There's been some violence because there's a lot of money to be made, and there's a mountain called Murder Mountain. So that's the kind of the dark side of it, I guess. But I just thought captivating story of outlaws and these people trying to basically make money. I mean, I think the answer, or the moral of the story, is the sooner that we legalize it and make it accessible for all of the states, so that there is no money to be made on the black market, and that the white market is competitive and has affordable prices, and it's not doesn't make more sense to go into the black market and earn money that way. That'll be the end of that story,
Well, I mean, I think it's absurd that we're not able to do any research on a federal level about any of this stuff. I think that there's still so much that isn't known about cannabis and other things that are, obviously proven to be beneficial in a number of ways, but also harmful. And so how do we figure out what the difference is and how that balance goes if we can't even, put money into researching it, which is completely backwards. And I think the United States is falling behind to other countries in terms of that kind of research. When, you prescribe this to this plant to cancer patients, we need to be able to understand what its properties are, what its potential abuse is, what its potential drawbacks are. Something that I really was fascinated by as an asthmatic. I was born with it, maybe not born, but I had asthma as a kid, and it's kind of gone away over the years. It's gotten a lot better. And one of the interesting things about learning about cannabis is it's actually a bronchodilator. So a bronchodilator is like an albuterol inhaler, basically something that you take to open up your lung passageways, like your airways. And the interesting thing about cannabis is it's actually it has properties that do that. So I think there's a lot of you would think any kind of smoke is an irritant. It would be irritating to an asthmatic. Well, in fact, yes, the smoke actually does have properties that are irritants, but the properties in THC and CBD are actually, something that actually helps you in ways that are different. So, well, where's the balance there? You know what I mean? Do we prescribe this kind of stuff to asthmatics, but smoke is bad for asthmatics, right? So how do we kind of figure out what that balance is? we don't know. It's just kind of this weird, like you're right, it is like this green rush kind of environment where now in California, states like California, we just had our first year where it was legal and recreationally, and that's, you know, a step in the right direction. But what's the point if, like, you know, I guess it's one of those arguments like states' rights versus the, you know, what the federal government's going to say about things, which is what I said about last week. Like, you know, screw DC and screw Trump and people telling you what to do. You know, if you're gonna like take agency as a community and say this is something we want to do, the federal government to me has no right to like step into that and say no, that's on the level of cocaine or heroin or like even things that are worse. It's like, no, this is something that people like should be taking for health reasons, but we need to know where we draw the line with that, though. We can't do that if we have no research, sanctioned research.
Yeah, that's, you take it off of the schedule. I mean, the easiest way to do that is you can just take it off of a Schedule 1 drug, and then people can, yeah, learn about it. I
How does
mean,
that happen? How do we do that? How do we get it off the Schedule 1? What does that entail? Do you know?
most states do it. I mean, once it's like majority of states don't, you know, majority of states have it legalized, and it becomes a moot point anyway. And you have backward states, probably. I'm not going to name any now, but there are states that tend to be long-term backward states that will probably be last, that are last in some other ways. But you know, and then once people come around, then it just becomes law of the land. And you know, hopefully that doesn't take too long. But I agree, man. I think that there is a lot to learn about it. And you just want to make it safe, and it's about educating people, I think, because it's been illegal. And I mean, how do you tell? It's an entire country was told to believe that if you smoke marijuana once, you're going to start doing meth the next day or cocaine the next day, you know? So it was way lopsided on one end, and you don't want to have it to be totally, you know, on the other side of the spectrum where everyone is doing whatever they want. You know, you got to have some education. Don't drive and do it. And, you know, just be careful, or this is what to expect or whatever. And then let people make their own decisions at the right age. But, and the health benefits, I totally agree, man. You know, people, I mean, there's like videos that pop up all the time about, you know, any other type of illness that people have that's in some way. And, you know, maybe it's, maybe everything I'm saying is I forget the word. It's just, you know, hearsay or whatever. I'm just saying everything that I know, but it's not, I mean, I don't have the data to talk about this stuff, but that's the problem that I guess we're describing, is the fact that there is not enough data for people to come around and agree on the merits or faults of marijuana and the drug itself. So I guess the answer to that is take it off of Schedule 1 and allow people to do research and test it, and then we'll be able to come to informed decisions about regulations on it and how dangerous it actually is.
And psilocybin too. I mean, the idea of this being a therapeutic, you know, something that's it's plant medicine, right? It's like one of these things that, you know, it's been perceived as like a new agey kind of like spiritual way of like, you know, therapy, or even as like kind of like a party drug, if you will. But it has real spiritual properties amongst, you know, indigenous people, and they're very, you know, some of these plants have incredibly important roles in societies, you know. And it's just to completely say that it's a criminal offense, you know, having a government body say that does incredible damage to the good that these things can do in people's lives. And then it kind of creates this like you know, the prohibition doesn't work, right? That's when abuse starts to happen. If you start like putting things, you know, if you start saying something's illegal, more people are going to want to do it and more people are going to want to abuse it. And so that's like the unfortunate kind of aspect of the war on drugs, if you will. But I think we are coming around, but I just think it's like it's so unbalanced though. You know, I feel like there has to be like a nice like balance for, you know, understanding how these things can benefit our lives, understanding how they can ruin our lives, because they can, like any kind of substance of anything can. A phone can ruin your life, you know, like like, you know, light bulbs. I don't know. I'm not a
Yeah.
conspiracy theorist, but I think
People,
there's a potential that you don't know. If you don't know of the harm of something, we don't know the harm that our cell phones have on us. We don't know if we're going to experience like radioactive like insanity in like 5 years by just being like connected to a phone all the time. Same can be said about vape pens. If you vape every day, maybe you're going to get like, I don't know, dick cancer. Who knows?
technology, I mean, this maybe the prevalence of cancer is because of yeah, all the plastics or whatever.
Monsanto. Maybe it's because they're putting shit in our food, man.
It is, like, yeah. I mean, whatever. It could be a lot. I agree. But I mean, live and let live. I guess live and let.
This is important though, man. I told Sue in a text, I think, about how like eating whole foods from the ground, I think is like a really important like aspect of life that we don't even, you know, this is a thing that is lost in the modern like city dweller. Like when you, if you live in a food desert in like the middle of, you know, some inner city and you just have like crap liquor stores with canned food and like you have like fast food everywhere, if that's what you start seeing as food. If you become this like earthy of the ground vegan hippie that lives on a commune, you're going to see like things that are grown out of the ground as food. You're not going to see that as food anymore. You're not going to see the McDonald's as food anymore. You'll just see that as garbage that people use as fuel. But you won't see it as food. And so I think there is this kind of movement that I think is going to happen more over the next however many years in terms of this kind of shift away from like the city's luxuries. And I say fast food is a luxury too, because you pull up in your vehicle and you like press a button and it comes out to you for like cheap, right? It's a really stupid, easy thing. It's like a very whatever. Maybe luxury is not the right word, but it's this availability where something as simple as like a carrot in the ground is going to be so much better for you. But it's almost like it's like an afterthought. It's just that's something we see in a store, and you're going to pick that up at the store, just like you're going to pick up, you know, cow dung or whatever you buy at the grocery store these days. So, you know, what I'm saying is like this is why I think education is a big part of this too. If you educate kids, like if you have a garden at your school or whatever, you're like, yo, there's this stuff in the ground that we grow it and it's like an interactive thing. We're going to teach you, you're going to see how, you know, you have the soil and how you do this and how you water it. You're going to watch it grow and you're going to eat it after. You see the whole process as opposed to just waking up like a spoiled asshole on your phone playing Candy Crush and just kind of, you know, heating up something in a microphone in a microwave, because that's what you do. That it completely depersonalize, it just commodifies something that should be like, it should be a wholesome way of looking at what you put in your body matters, as opposed to just like this, like, whatever, man. It's a very nihilistic thing, cities, I think. And I'm not trying to say it's a city thing, but it's this attitude that's prevalent in cities. Is like, it's a very nihilistic, like, look, whatever, man, let's just eat whatever. And like, it's just all crap. Like, if you understood the process of it all, you might take more care and you might look after this whole thing better. Maybe that's the part of the transition of where we go from here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's time and it's money and people. That's just the way that things are set up, just with our economy and society, is that people are working 8, 9, however many hour days. So
That's not
people,
healthy.
well, yeah, I mean, it all kind of depends. If people like their jobs and they enjoy what they're doing and they're not breaking their backs in the process, then, whatever. It's just like anything else, is in all things moderation, but including moderation. But I mean, I just watched this thing on Netflix, Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, Chef's Table, Anthony Bourdain. I mean, there's something powerful. I mean, I think what you're trying to describe is the power of creating something that is a work of art. I mean, is on its extreme. Maybe you could say that it's always a work of art because you created it yourself, but whatever. I think the point is that you created it, and then you get to enjoy it with other people and create a shared experience, and that's what they consider the absolute pinnacle of living. I understand that, and yeah, we're probably not doing that as much as we should, because people are busy. Maybe we're too everyone's focused on efficiency and time and the fastest this and that, and so maybe it's slowing down, maybe it's making good food more affordable, organic food or whatever, but and it's just teaching it. So that's why I'm watching these things on I don't the problem is I watch this stuff and I nod my head and say yes, but I mean, it's different now. Once I leave my house and live on my own again, that'll change. Shout out, Mom. Thanks for everything. But I haven't been like cooking and doing anything since I've been watching all that stuff and after everything I've just said. So I am the hypocrite city dweller, I guess.
Yeah, you are. So I want to talk about this concept. Have you heard about this concept of blue zones? So blue zones are regions of the world where this guy, Dan Buettner, he's a National Geographic Fellow and New York Times bestselling author. He claims these blue zones are where people live longer than average. So some, he identifies certain blue zones like Okinawa, Japan, Sardinia in Italy, Nicoya, Costa Rica, Ikaria, Greece, other spots. And, all these places produce a radically high rate of people live over 100, and they suffer a fraction of the diseases that commonly kill people in other parts of the developed world, and they enjoy more years of good health. And so there's this there's some characteristics here. There's a Venn diagram that kind of talks about like what some of these places have in common. And they all have these things in common. Family is number one. Like they put family ahead of other concerns, right? So if you are concerned about having like a healthy, well family, it's not about like rushing around so much. It's about putting them first and making sure they're eating the right things and like having them be active and all that. Less smoking is one of them. Semi-vegetarianism. The majority of food consumed is derived from plants. Constant moderate physical activity, which is an inseparable part of life. Social engagement. People of all ages are socially active and integrated in their communities. And legumes are commonly consumed. So, you think about like people like sharing like a dinner in like Tuscany, Italy or whatever. Like, I feel like, you have this idyllic vision of people living out in the country kind of, and they have this long rectangular table and they bust out the vino and they all, eat out there for hours and they share a laugh and good times. Those people are probably going to be healthier and live longer lives than the person that's like anxious and stressed out all the time, barely making ends meet and just trying to live his life in some crap polluted city. And I don't know. See, I guess part of my point here is part of me honestly does believe that we need to radically transform society into more of an eco-socialist state. And how do we do that? I don't know. But I think it's going to be a huge aspect of how we make it, like invest all the money you want to invest in terraforming Mars or the moon to live on, and just radically use all those resources, just radically transform Earth into this like thing that like this organism that is fully, this kind of recycle ideology of, only using what we can use and, making every bit count. And none of us are doing that. You and me aren't doing it right now. But at least I want to make a cognizant effort towards shifting towards that kind of lifestyle where, I'm happy and healthy and well and not like freaked out by living in like fucking Big Brother, infested, shithole city.
Well, yeah, man. I think one of the inherent strengths of America is that we have a lot of wide open territory, and you can go, and as long as you're not breaking any laws and doing it or whatever, and go and live out and do whatever the hell you want to do. So, and that's great about both, is that you can do both. And if you like the city, you have the freedom to go and do whatever and live there. The cities have given us a lot, and the rural areas give you a lot too. And so long as people can be happy in both and don't, I think this whole urban versus rural, and coast versus heartland or whatever, I understand why. I just would prefer it not to be that way.
I think we have to take
So,
things, like I think the rural communities are going to take things that from urban communities, like technology. You can use technology in rural communities so you don't have to be in a city anymore. And I think the urban communities can look at the sustainability aspect of rural communities where they do live more eco-socialist lives. I honestly, like, this sounds fascist. I think people would consider me an eco-fascist to a certain extent by me simply saying that I think everyone in a city needs to have some kind of role to play where they are giving back to the planet in some way. Like, I think that should be a part of, like, this is what you need to do in society. Like, if we're going to give you a universal basic income or whatever, you need to like be a conscious, like, you need to plant trees, or you need to like, give in, you need to contribute to the green economy, a greener economy. Like, this has to be a communal effort though. And I don't see how this conversation really gets started, and it's something that we need to, I think we do need to radically transform. We can't just have cities continue to develop the way that cities to be. Like, you're saying it's like, oh, but it's fine. But it's like, I don't think it's fine though, man. I think cities are a good example of rampant capitalism going too far and not having these like checks on the environment. And just look at Beijing, man. I mean, that's not a good situation. I fear that a lot of these cities in the future, half of the world's global cities can end up being like a New Delhi kind of like type dystopia. Maybe I'm just over
I feel like
exaggerating.
New Delhi. I feel like New Delhi would resent that, but
Hey, to all people in New Delhi, like, just hit me up in the comments. I still love you, but I feel like you guys are polluted.
even though, or no, Ben got pickpocketed there, huh?
Yeah, I didn't have a good experience in New Delhi, so the comment stands.
But I mean, I think that things self-correct. That's the way. I think just things. That's my. I mean, think about it. Miami is going to start being flooded soon.
Marco Rubio doesn't seem to care.
Well, I mean, things are going to start happening where the sea level rises and earthquakes, and I mean, I guess earthquakes is like the one thing that probably is not going to change based off of global warming. But hurricanes, I think, any other like things, weather pattern, the realities are going to start coming to bear, and then people in the cities are going to have to live in more eco-friendly ways. I mean, or everyone is going to have to do it. Like maybe using Monsanto and those pesticides and all those chemicals. I mean, everyone relies on technology to varying degrees. In the cities, it's more. But I mean, just plastics, the amount of plastics that we use, and just the cars and everything. I mean, everyone uses oil and gas, and it's beef. It's everyone likes cows and eating meat in this country. So we're gonna have to figure that out. I mean, it's a lot of basic stuff that we've kind of like, nobody's being like malicious about it. I think some ways like kind of goes overboard. If anything, I think the billionaires have the most conspicuous consumption and have the biggest eco. I mean, I'm not saying I mean, that's the danger, right? I mean, those people should be, maybe after like things get really bad, people are going to start going after the fossil fuel companies, but the fossil fuel companies, whatever they're producing and supplying our demand that we wanted because we were consuming a lot. So I don't know how you handle that. And rich people have more of a footprint. So, but I mean, it's all going to be it's the same thing that's happening on a countrywide basis. Do the rich countries the problems of global warming that happen in countries,
Just went out. You got to repeat all
so
that.
it's the same thing that's happening on the global level with thing else that's about I think that's the Paris Climate Accord, that is rich countries helping to pay off the damage that global warming is causing to poorer countries. They're feeling the effects of it first because of the big carbon emitters like China and America and anywhere else. So it's the same thing that might be, that same problem might also find its way to America, the United States, and how we resolve that is going to be a big test, just like it's a test on a global level that we are probably failing right now.
Sad.
Well, we were supposed to be not pessimistic today, but I feel like, I don't know, I was more, what?
How do we tick back the doomsday clock, Matthias? What do we do?
Oh, whatever. Everyone just chill out. We're fine. We're all good. I'm not worried. even though every podcast that we do seems to be a downer. You can look at anything and be depressed, but screw you.
This is called no, screw you. This is called the state of everything. And look, when you talk about everything, you got to talk about the good and the bad, right? You can't put your rose tinted glasses on and say the world is la di da. You also can't be like, yo, everything's going to hell tomorrow, because like it won't. So it's like, you got to have this balance. And I think if we're going to talk about everything, it'd be kind of balanced. I think we're pretty balanced for the most part.
We talk about everything.
Everything. So do you have anything you'd like to close on tonight?
Let me see here. If you've got something ready, you can go ahead. Otherwise, I can find something. Sure. Do you have something?
Well, I have a little passage here. It's a preface from a book I just checked out. I'm excited to read. I'm just going to read the preface here. It says, 300 years ago, the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution began their pounding work on the foundations of an ancient order. Like twin hammers, these forces demolished most of what once seemed permanent. Kings, alchemists, popes, feudal lords, they were all undone. Today, a fresh hammer is cracking our world. The demands of constant, instant connection are tearing at old power arrangements. The formation of networks of all kinds for trade and biology, and finance and warfare, and any of the 1,000 varied needs is producing new and still dimly understood sources of power. They are eroding the roots of an older order, even as a new one is beginning to appear. That last great shift of the Enlightenment was a violent and wonderful transformation. It produced winners and losers, triggered tragedy, and lit fresh triumphs. What lies ahead of us is the same. A new landscape of power is emerging now. And then it says about how this book is the story of that. And the tale of the instinct will divide those who master it from those who will be mastered by it. This is a recommendation from Matthias. It's The Seventh Sense, and it's by Joshua Cooper Ramo. Just finally got this at the old library. So I'm excited about this because this is it's power, fortune, and survival in the age of networks. That's some epic shit, man.
Well, I'm very much looking forward to discussing that with you.
Yeah.
I will have to refresh my memory on that, but saddle up, shine your boots, and load your pistols. That's going to be a good book.
All right.
And this is, I feel like what I was going to say is a good follow up to that. I have one quote by Teddy Roosevelt. Wow. But the one that so a very large part of the rancor of political and social strife springs from the fact that different classes or sections are so cut off from each other that neither appreciates the other's passions, prejudices, and indeed point of view. So Teddy Roosevelt, speaking wisdom through the ages. And another one, FDR, not too far after, the country needs, and unless I mistake its temper, the country demands bold experimentation. It is common sense to take a method and try it. If it fails, admit it frankly and try another. But above all, try something.
Mm-hmm.
So the answer is in American history.
Yeah, probably. Somehow. I mean, I honestly do think, though, I think that even if you only studied American history, you still wouldn't be able to figure out the problems of tomorrow. I think they're going to be so complex and so unprecedented. You have to know the history in order to solve the problems, but I honestly think you have to pull from more than just history, though. There's a lot of different, like, I think the problems of tomorrow are so complex that you have to be incredibly well rounded, and I guess that's part of what we're trying to accomplish here.
Yeah, there's endless to talk about. We'll get that next time.
Find your icky guy. I'll say that. That's important for everybody. Find your reason for being, because that's what will lead to a better tomorrow for us all.
Same.
All right. Thanks.